Hello and welcome to Health Professional Radio. I'm your host, Neil Howard. Glad that you could return. Going to be speaking with Marie Lamont this morning, President and Chief Operating Officer at Inteliquet. It's a leader in clinical trial matching. She's joining us to talk about the impact that COVID-19 has had on clinical trials. Welcome to Health Professional Radio. Marie, thank you.
Thank you so very much. I appreciate you taking the time with me today.
Well, as President and COO of Inteliquet, give us a bit of your professional background and talk about the goal there at your organization.
Sure. My professional background is a little odd, perhaps, than most. I spent a lot of time in operations and then finance in the biotech, biopharma industry, moved into running a patient services business, and then over to consulting and then Inteliquet. I've touched clinical trials on and off, and I've touched data on and off throughout my whole career. But interestingly enough, what Inteliquet does relating to clinical trials and patients is very meaningful to me, and it creates a bit of passion because in the end, the only way new therapies can be brought to patients is through clinical trials. And cancer especially, there's such a needy population that anything we can do that provides hope to docs and their patients is a good thing. And so that's what motivates us at Inteliquet, both me and all the staff. It's a purpose-driven, very small organization, but we feel that passion of bringing choices.
Before the COVID-19 pandemic hit, roughly a year ago, what were some of the major challenges when it came to clinical trial matching?
So let me give you a couple of just broad-based stats, because that'll explain what's happening. Before the pandemic, only about 3 to 5% of cancer patients participated in clinical trials. Pretty low number compared to other disease areas. And what it takes for cancer centers and their staff to identify patients is incredibly time consuming. They have to go into the EMR where they get about 60% of what they need, and it's crawling through that patient's chart. The other 40% of what they need is in other ancillary documents. Pathology reports, next generation sequencing reports, biomarker reports, laboratory and companion diagnostics. So if you imagine you're taking time, hours to crawl through charts to find patients. And if you're lucky, you find a small number that might go into a trial. And it's important because if they fail on first-line therapy, you want to know there's some hope to give them alternate therapies. That's what it comes down to, is giving that choice and that hope. But 40% of cancer clinical trials never reach full enrollment targets because it's so tough to find the patients. And it's not that they're not there. It's the tough work that it takes to find them. In today's world, we are doing targeted therapies based on diagnostics. Right? That's where you get your biomarkers, your molecular data points. But a doc and their staff can't remember every patient's biomarker data. You've got to go find it in the EMR. So I use those to describe the challenges. And the other thing is 14% of clinical trials were shut down without ever reaching full enrollment. That doesn't mean they were finished with low enrollment numbers. It means they were closed down because they couldn't get the enrollment. So enrollment becomes a big deal, and advertising is not necessarily the only way to find patients.
Now, all of this was before the pandemic. Now, during this pandemic,
yes.
patients are they're getting fewer diagnostic tests for any reason, fewer screenings due to these lockdowns and social distancing mandates, and just the fear of becoming infected with COVID-19. Certainly, the challenges that you spoke of have been doubled or quadrupled as a result of this pandemic, I'm sure.
You are absolutely correct. This is one thing I can talk about for hours. But let me give you an example. 10% of clinical trials shut down And I believe more than 1,200 clinical trials were ended early because of the pandemic. Mm-hmm. So all of a sudden you see a shrinkage in the trials that were being offered to patients. Then you layer in the fewer diagnostic tests and screenings. I think the Oncology Practice Management had a publication, diagnosis were down 37% for cancer. It doesn't mean there are 37% less cancer patients. It means their diagnosis has been delayed, which means their disease is progressing. And there's data out there, I think it was a QVIA report, that said 22 million people postponed cancer screening tests and 80,000 patients delayed or missed diagnosis. So you take the lack of companion diagnostics or screening, plus you've got cancer centers that have been completely, and hospitals, overwhelmed with COVID cases. And they're unable to bring patients in for the diagnostics. So you have patients who don't want to go in, you have screening centers closed, and you have hospitals that aren't able to have people come in or have scaled that number down. So it's no surprise that we're seeing patients not receiving the choice of trials because docs, nurses, and other staff are working around the clock to save lives related to COVID. So you're spot on. There are major issues that we are worried that are going to come down the pipe or turnpike, if you will, over the next year or two for those patients who haven't gotten the screening and diagnostics, whose disease will progress, that they won't know about. And the worst thing you can have is have a patient identified at stage 3 or stage 4, but there's just a lot less options for them.
How is Inteliquet positioned to combat this coming situation, and how is it helping companies to leverage technology to combat the current situation when it comes to clinical trial matching?
Sure. There's two things we did. For a number of the cancer centers that we work with, we offered up our help. If they needed our help to do pre-screening during the pandemic, we would take our clinical engagement staff, their cancer former cancer research nurses, we would offer them up because it was the right thing to do to help the cancer center staff. But in reality, what we do is we offer a platform that helps them. I want to be careful because technology doesn't solve all problems. What you want your technology to do is cut out the most difficult work so that you can put your time into the most valuable efforts. And our technology actually ingests data, clinically relevant healthcare data, not just from the EMR, but from reports and PDFs, laboratory information management systems, tumor registries, and it sits behind the firewall at hospitals for them to use. We also digitize clinical trials. So you take this data that's been converted into structured data, we digitize a clinical trial, and it's almost like puzzle pieces. You put the two together, and you can actually use technology to do your first and second line screening for patients. And then we produce patients that are proposed matches for clinical trials to those sites. So their staff, instead of having to do the detailed work to crawl through the chart, can take this short list of patients and then go through and validate it. It just makes their time more valuable. Another example is one of our applications on our platform is called Inteliquet. It allows the sites to do feasibility work faster. And I don't know if you're familiar with sort of the feasibility study questionnaires that cancer centers have to fill out, but they can be really time consuming. They spell out the criteria that makes a patient eligible or ineligible for a trial. And cancer centers have to go through and fill it all out. On average, it can take as long as 3 hours to complete a single feasibility questionnaire. We have a site that it took them about 24 hours a week to do all of the feasibility questionnaires they received. This is manual effort, but it's manual effort for a purpose because you want to offer your patients clinical trials as an option. So our system allows them to do all of that feasibility work electronically. It goes very quickly and precisely identifies whether or not they're going to have the patient population to support a trial. So instead of taking 24 hours a week, It takes 30 minutes now.
Wow.
All it's doing is simplifying their work and their time, right? Again, it's not meeting all of their needs. Tools can't. We still need humans involved. But I think the important part of this is it's precision matching technology that is meant to help them, right? Cut out their time. And in the COVID world, they need as much time as they can get to work with patients directly instead of doing the paperwork.
Where can our listeners go and get some more information about Inteliquet and about the processes and technology that you're developing there?
Sure. Well, we do have a website. It's www.inteliquet, INTELQUET.com. And they're more than welcome to reach out to me directly. And so I'll give you that email address, which I know is horrifying that I'm going to do this, but it's mlamont, Lamont, @inteliquet.com. I'm very passionate about this. The cancer centers that work with us are really passionate about it. You know, I think having tools that make your life easier but allow you to have better choices for your physicians and patients is a great thing to have.
Well, I thank you for joining us here on Health Professional Radio. It's been a pleasure speaking with you, hoping that we'll speak again.
Oh, thank you so much, and I hope you have a wonderful day.
You as well. You've been listening to Health Professional Radio. I'm your host, Neil Howard, in conversation with Marie Lamont, President and Chief Operating Officer at Inteliquet. Audio copies of this program are available at hpr.fm and healthprofessionalradio.com.au. You can also subscribe to the podcast on iTunes. Listen in, download at SoundCloud, and be sure and subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/Health Professional Radio.